And with us here tonight, the Conservative Chair of the Health Select Committee, Sarah Wollaston, Labour's Shadow Justice Secretary, Richard Bergen, the former leader of UKIP, who stepped down last week and is now available for any ambassadorial post he might be offered, Nigel Farage, the novelist and New Statesman columnist, Will Self, and the former Tory MP who left British politics to live in New York, Louise Mensch. And as always, you don't need to feel left out. If you're watching this at home, you can join the debate. Facebook, Twitter, or you can text us on 83981. So let's get started with this question from Lewis Terry, please. Lewis Terry.
Is Donald Trump a worthy recipient of Time magazine's Person of the Year?
Right, Time magazine every year makes somebody the Person of the Year, or the person who's had the greatest influence, for better or worse. Is he a worthy recipient? Nigel Farage.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, the whole point of the prize is whether Time magazine think you're a force for good or a force for bad, and there aren't many shades of grey in terms of the way people look at Donald Trump. Either way, he's made the most dramatic impact on politics this year. Everybody thought it was literally impossible for him even to win the nomination, to get through the primaries. He did, and the day before the election, you know, the New York Times said there was a 97% probability that Hillary Clinton would win. He stunned everybody. He's taking over as president on the 20th of January. And not only do I think he's a worthy recipient of Time magazine's Person of the Year, I think he will also, by this time next year, surprise all of you by just how popular and good a president he's going to be.
Okay. Of course, it is influence, not a good influence or a bad influence that they choose. Hitler and Stalin were both chosen as...
Yes, and Churchill won.
Yes.
No, but I mean, he's been, you know, it is an astonishing thing that this man has become president.
Will Self.
I always think it's a bit of a paradox that Nigel Farage subscribes to the great man of history view, really, given that he doesn't quite shape up to that sort of stature himself. And while I think that Trump certainly is a personification of major changes in geopolitics, I'm not so sure that it's the man himself that's truly significant. It's more what he symbolises.
And in terms of what he symbolises, has he had the greatest influence on the events of the year?
Well, yes, undoubtedly. But I mean, as I say, it's what he symbolises. As with Brexit, it was a case that this was a political eventuality people didn't expect, but that's because we've moved beyond the frame of politics as it's been understood for a long time. And Trump rode that wave. To some extent, he kind of created it as well, that's true. But Trump, Nigel, this is not Churchill, Hitler and Stalin, thank God, in the case of the two latter.
I can't work that out.
But in the case of the two latter ones, undoubtedly a good thing, yeah. So I think that's kind of weird, because we step back from a minute, people. These are not great statesmen or people.
What are they? What are they?
They're grubby little opportunists who are riding the coattails of history. Oh, and deeply principled.
Louise Mensch.
I cannot believe that I am going to open this show by doing this after so many years of vociferously opposing Nigel Farage, but I have to say that he is being a bit too modest here, because he was one of the nominees for Time's Person of the Year, and it was given to Donald Trump, and he very generously didn't mention that when he was commending Trump. I do think it has to be Trump, because nobody else has provided such an earthquake as he has done in our politics. And he is, after all, a commensurate showman. And the line I like, living in America and watching this unfold, Hillary Clinton had an enormous victory in the popular vote, but you can't cry about that. You can't change the rules of the game after it has been played. Donald Trump won the Electoral College, that is it. However, the favourite comment that I had from somebody was they said that all the journalists took Donald Trump literally with what he said, but not seriously, whereas the voters took him seriously, but not literally. They didn't care if this policy or that policy was contradictory or whatever. They didn't care about that. What they cared for was that he stood for anti-political correctness. They were so tired of being trodden on and sat on by the establishment and not listened to that they said, let's give the showman a chance, and that's what's happened. And I will say that with one exception, I think that Donald Trump is appointing some very, very good people to his cabinet. It may not be, the name may be Mad Dog Mattis, but this guy is a boss, and I am really encouraged by the shape of this cabinet so far.
Any views from our audience? Yes, the woman there in the fourth row on the right. Yes.
Hasn't Donald Trump legitimised locker room talk about women on an absolutely unacceptable level? He's also legitimised now saying one thing in politics as long as it gets a vote and then doing something completely different. So it's all right to say all of these things if you're a politician. Once you get elected, you can do whatever you want. That's what he's legitimised.
Richard Bergen, what do you think of that?
Well, I was disappointed when Donald Trump got given this award, not least because some of the things that he has said about women, absolutely outrageous, misogynistic things, not least because of some of the things he said about immigrants and people of ethnic minority background. He didn't say that not one single extra Muslim should be allowed in the United States. But ultimately, I think the thing about Donald Trump is this. He's raised people's hope through a fake, anti-elitist approach. I believe, unlike Nigel, that he will disappoint. He railed against the bankers, he railed against the current economic way of doing things, but then appoints somebody from Goldman Sachs into a top position. So I don't think it's a welcome thing. And I am surprised to see Nigel trumpeting Trump so much. He's trumpeted him so much, he's now in a situation where he has to decide his own future, whether to be a Tory lord or Trump's butler.
Is that the choice you face?
No, I don't think it is. No, I mean, the thing is, I do know Trump. I did support Trump in the campaign. I spoke with him on a platform. I completely accept, that he says things that shock everybody. But he also apologises, which is interesting. Very few people in politics ever apologise. He rode back on that Muslim comment in quite a big way. He apologised for locker room talk. I agree with you. It was unacceptable. But he has shown he's able to say, I'm sorry, I went too far. As far as our relationship with him is concerned, just remember this.
Our or your?
Our relationship as a country. As a country.
Right, yeah.
This is a strong Anglophile president of the USA. He likes this country, he admires this country, he wants us to get back to having an even, well, not just a special relationship, an even better one, starting with a free trade deal. And I think this government, having been so rude about him, virtually every cabinet member was rude about him during the campaign, I think that they need to eat some humble pie, go and see him as quickly as they can, and let's get cracking with a new relationship.
He likes Russia quite a lot.
Well,
and
it's interesting.
Putin's politics.
He doesn't want to go to war with Russia, and it's very interesting that we have Hillary, we have the European Union, we have the political class in this country all want Putin to be the enemy. Very keen to go on provoking Putin. I wouldn't want to live in Putin's Russia any more than you would, but I do think Trump's idea, he'll get on a plane, well, his plane, of course, and he will go to Moscow and sit down and talk with people. That is a much better way to deal with international affairs than to provoke Russia by trying to get the Ukraine to join the EU and NATO.
All right.
I think we've made
Nigel,
some very bad mistakes
Nigel,
here.
thank you very much. Sarah Wollaston, I want to bring you in. Nigel just said almost every politician in this country made the great mistake of insulting him. You agree with that?
Well, I was one of the people that felt that if you are going to exclude all Muslims from this country, from the States, why should he be allowed a free pass here? And I'm glad he apologised for that. Did he apologise for stereotyping all Mexicans as rapists, for example? I think some of his divisive, nasty politics, it's really depressing. And isn't it terrible that we're starting from such a low baseline that what we're hoping for is that he doesn't carry out any of his promises?
OK. And you, sir? Yes?
Just bringing it back to this about the locker room talk and everything like that. Yes, Trump has said one thing and he's done another. Politicians have been doing this for hundreds of years. They always will. The difference with Trump is that he's honest about it, and like Nigel just said, he apologises when he gets it wrong.
OK, and you, sir, and then we're going to go on because we can't... Yes, yes, you, sir.
Don't the extreme results and characters that we've seen this year reflect a lack of ability of mainstream politics to provide a moderate response to genuine concerns of many people?
Will Self, do you agree with that?
Well, I think things are changing very, very fundamentally. And yes, I think that in a way our politics hasn't been responsive enough to the popular will in the past. There's no question about that. But whether the solution to that is to start electing people who have the views that Trump has, I'm not quite so sure that that's the case.
Right. And you in the front here.
I just personally feel that everyone in the world now is getting so disillusioned by what's going on. Everyone needs some sort of change. And I think the people like Trump and yourself and all that have stirred it up, if that's the wrong word to use, because everyone is so confused about what's going on in the world, you know, with Brexit and what's happening in, you know, China and Japan and all those sort of places. And I just think we need to have someone that's there to sort of kind of be a central point to sort of try and even out.
Yes, Sarah.
There are other voices. This year we heard someone say that we have far more in common with each other than that which divides us. And that person was Jo Cox, and frankly she should have been Person of the Year.
OK, well... 10 minutes on Trump is enough, I think, for tonight. We're just a word, we're going to be back after Christmas with Question Time in Solihull and Peterborough, or Solihull if you prefer it. And if you'd like to join the audience, the address is there. I'll give it again at the end, so just make a note if you want it. And let's go on to the other topic of the year, Oscar Huxley.
Do you think a deal for Brexit could realistically be achieved in 2 years?
Can the deal be achieved in 2 years, which is what the leaders of the negotiations in Europe are saying it has to be? Is it too complicated? Richard Bergen.
Well, in order to get a deal in the first place, what we need is a plan. And that's why I was so pleased that yesterday in Parliament, Labour MPs forced the agenda so that at long last Theresa May has agreed to put a plan before the British people, and that's really, really important. It's taken a long time, but they're going to publish a plan before the 31st of March. Of course it's complicated. A binary choice was given in the EU referendum. 48% of people, of course, voted to remain. 52% voted to leave. But what we need now is a plan. Britain should leave the European Union because Britain voted to leave the European Union. Labour will vote to trigger Article 50. We will hold the government to account, not to ransom. But what we need to do is stop talking like the Liberal Democrats are about the 48%, stop talking like UKIP are about the 52%, and let's bring people together. Let's talk about the 100% and move forward as a country for a post-Brexit Britain that works in the interests of everyone in our country.
Well, that's fine. That's fine words, but can you get that by October 2018, in your view, in a way that you want, when the House of Commons may well be divided over what is negotiated?
Well, it is possible, but nothing in politics and nothing in economics is certain. Of course it's going to be complex, but what we need is a situation where a blank cheque isn't given to Theresa May, an unelected Prime Minister, to do what she wishes. People have voted by majority to leave the European Union, therefore we need to leave the European Union. But I think voices from all sides of the House of Commons and voices from right across the country, both from the 48% and the 52%, need to be heard if we're going to get any kind of deal that keeps this country together.
Sarah Wollaston, what's your view of the politics of this and whether it'll all be achieved within the 2 years?
It's immensely complex. I think it will take 2 years. But there are things that we need to get on with straight away. We need to get on with sorting out the status of EU nationals living in the UK already and British nationals living in Europe. And I hope that that will be the first priority. But also, we've got to keep the tone friendly. I think that having a belligerent tone against our European partners isn't helpful. And we need to keep the tone right and positive because it's in all of our interests for this to be a friendly separation. We want to be good neighbours.
But do you think that Conservative and Labour will come together to agree what's on offer, or is there...
Well, I'm an optimist.
2 years from now, we're going to be divided on it.
I'm an optimist that people will see on both sides of the channel and across political parties that this is too serious for it to become a divisive issue, and we must work together in the national interest.
All right. Well, Nigel Farage, do things that are too serious not become divisive?
I mean, 6 months have nearly gone by since the referendum. We've wasted all this time already. You know, had the Prime Minister shown real leadership, triggered Article 50, we wouldn't be going through court cases. We'd actually be getting on with the process. And my concern is that we trigger Article 50 in March. That's what the House of Commons agreed to do. And if we spend 2 years negotiating this, that'll be another net £20 billion we paid away. It'll be another, at current rates, at least 500,000 people who come to settle in this country, net. But more crucially, it'll be lost opportunities. I talked about America earlier. There are 24 countries since we left the EU that have come to us and said, we want to have a trade deal with the United Kingdom. It's very difficult for us to do any of that whilst we're going through this process. So I would say this, if we wanted to, we could leave in 2 weeks. If we wanted to. We could just say, that's it, we're leaving, we'll trade with you on WTO rules. The reason it's going to take a long time is because my impression is that this government and most people in Parliament want us to stay in the single market. And I think we're going to finish up in the spring of 19, effectively with a Norwegian-type deal, which is not what the people of this country voted for. But that, I think, is where it's going to go.
Hello, I'm Norman Tebbit. I want to tell you very briefly about the introduction you're going to see to a most extraordinarily interesting film, The Norway Option, which shows how Norway has conducted a successful relationship outside the European Union, but close to it.
The film compares Britain with Norway, a country which twice voted against membership nearly 20 years ago. The people of Norway decided not to join the European Union. I'm going to talk to some people and find out how they've got on. Watch The Norway Option and you can see that Britain really does have a better future.
I mean, after all, Norway sells 75% of our overseas goods to countries that are members of the European Union without being a full member of it.
Funny you should mention Norway. I was just about to cite the Norwegian example of a good reason for staying in. The Norwegians all say, if you go to Norway, that they get all the disadvantages and none of the advantages.
It's one of the clever arguments that gets put out.
Well, this is what Norwegians say themselves.
Well, that's what some Norwegians say. Yes, the Norwegians, buying and selling from a single market, have to comply with legislation over which they haven't had a say. But, you know, the Norwegians have no ties in terms of foreign policy with the European Union. They have no ties in terms of their fishing industry, where they have a 200-mile limit. They are opted out and exempted from all the things that really make the British mad.
Countries such as Norway and Switzerland have thrived outside of the European Union, but still have strong trading links with the EU member countries. Should the UK follow suit?
Should we follow the example of Norway and Switzerland, have strong trading links and thrive outside the European Union? OK, well, we'll bring in Nigel Farage on that, and then I'll come to some other speakers. Nigel Farage.
Well, I have to say that everybody from David Cameron to half this panel say, wouldn't it be terrible if we were like Norway and Switzerland? Really? They're rich, they're happy, they're self-governing.
We're told Britain's not big enough. She couldn't possibly survive on her own and make her own trade deals. And people say, well, actually, Norway, Iceland and Switzerland do pretty well. Ah, yeah, but they're ghastly little countries. I mean, this disparagement of these countries is extraordinary. Look, Norway, let's just sort of get a couple of things here right, shall we? You know, the Prime Minister saying how ghastly Norway is. They're rich. They top the world's happiness index. They're allowed to catch their own fish. And they've made their own trade relationship with Europe, which suits them.
But they have to pay he would say they'd have to pay the cash and have none of the decision-making power.
Well, that is straightforward untrue, because actually they don't pay their money to Brussels, they pay their money directly to some of the poorer emerging southern and eastern European countries. And you know why they do it? They choose to do it, and perhaps because they're a lot richer than us, they're able to do it. So that's not true. We're told Norway doesn't have a seat at the top table. Oh, yes, it does. Norway sits at the World Trade Organization. We don't. Britain doesn't. We're represented by somebody who's there from the European Union. We're told that Norway has to accept all the rules. Oh, no, they don't. Oh, no, they don't. When the Postal Services Directive came out, you know, the one that effectively closed hundreds of post offices all over Britain, the Norwegians said, no, we're vetoing it. So the Norwegians retain the right of veto.
So, Nigel Farage, when you said, as you did, a 52-48 result would be unfinished business...
I didn't for me, no. I said within the Conservative Party, it would be unfinished business. What was clear...
Is it... Sorry, no, my question isn't... My question is, all right, maybe you did or didn't say that, but the question is whether, if that's so, what you're saying now, which is that it's going to be a Norwegian-style deal, which is not what we wanted, what's going to happen then?
Well, I think that if we don't get our fishing waters back, we don't get our passports back, we don't get away from the European Court of Justice having the ability to rule on our businesses, our industries, and if we don't get back the ability to make our own trade deals, then I think the 2020 general election could well be a very big replay of this referendum, because I think the one thing I do know, and yes, of course, there were all sorts of things said on both sides of the argument. The temperature got raised to a level we've never seen in this country. What I do know is the 17.5 million people that voted for it, despite being told we'd fall off a cliff and terrible things would happen to us, they voted for it because they meant it. And I think they are not going to change their mind on this. So I hope that the local MP here gives us some real leadership, because frankly, in the first few months, we've had precious little. And if she tells us clearly that we're not just leaving the European Union, we're leaving the single market, because that's what people voted for, I would then be very reassured, and the next general election would be more or less business as usual.
Right.
But that's not where I think it's going.
All right. I said we were in Maidenhead, which is, of course, Theresa May's constituency. Will Self.
Yeah, I think Nigel's analysis is probably right, actually. The Cabinet's clearly divided.
Yeah.
There isn't an agreement on whether to go for a hard or a soft Brexit. I think what people voted for was a variety of things who voted for Brexit, and they voted because they felt their livelihoods under threat, they felt in some sense that they were losing a kind of control in their communities. If they were feeling very, very immiserated, they perhaps were being thrust into bigotry and looking around at the society and reacting against our immigrant communities, and all of that was pretty unsavoury. But I don't think what they actually voted for was to suffer the kind of catastrophic, not recession, but I would wager depression that will occur if we go straight to WTO rules. You know, why on earth wouldn't the Europeans, for example, Nigel, bring back the denomination of Eurobonds from the city to Frankfurt or wherever they choose to do it? I have to say, you know, I think a lot of the Brexiteers are still living in a bit of a weird kind of, you know, keep saying bring back this, bring back that, bring back the birch, bring back bicycles, bring back spinsters, bring back two-way family forces favourites. So what else are you going to bring back?
Bring back democracy. Bring back democracy. Bring back self-government.
Right,
that's what we voted for, and that's what we want.
Well, that's what you say people
but actually,
voted
Nigel,
for.
I think a rerun of the issues within the context of the political system we're used to is far more democratic than a winner-takes-all referendum. And all of this kind of talk that the politicians are doing now, because they're desperately worried about their vote, is to say, oh, no, you know, we all respect the will of the people. The will of those incredibly politically committed people, Nigel, who you now have summoned into a great civil society. We're all going to be working away.
Well, he says we're going to end up with a solution like Norway, and that isn't what people want.
Well, I like Norway.
All right, OK. Right, let's just silence, if we can, our panel just for a moment. I'll come to Elise and hear what you think here in Maidenhead. The woman there, how you voted, I don't know, but what do you want to see happen?
I voted to remain.
Yes.
But I feel that people were misled by politicians, saying 350 million we're paying to Europe will go to NHS. The same politicians changed their mind next day, saying that, oh no, we haven't got any money now.
What do you want to see happen now?
Sorry?
What do you want to see happen now?
Well, we have to trade with Europe. We'll still be paying money to Europe to trade with them.
Why?
If we want to do business with them.
All right, let's go to some other people. The woman there in blue, purple, is it there?
I think the Westminster cartel are a bit slow to realise that politics are being done differently now. And I think the basic problem that we've got at the moment is that we've got a parliament that doesn't really represent the people.
And what do you mean by done differently?
I think it's the grassroots that put Trump where he is, the grassroots that put Jeremy Corbyn where he is, the grassroots that caused Brexit to happen. And I think they're still living in a world where they haven't realised that with the advent of the internet and the ability of people to be able to communicate with each other a lot more, that politics is being done differently.
Louise Mensch, I'll come to you. Louise Mensch.
I think there's a lot to what that lady just said, actually. And one of the things that annoys me watching from afar is the sort of mystic Meg that goes on, well, we voted for this and we voted for that, and people really think this and they really think that. I think the only thing you can take from it is the question that was on the ballot paper. And what won on the ballot paper was, should we leave the European Union? And the answer was yes. Beyond that, there was no detail. It wasn't on the ballot paper. If people had required all the detail in advance, presumably, they would have voted no. So somebody has to do those negotiations, and I don't agree with Nigel. I think that here in Maidenhead, Theresa will go into Europe and she will swing her handbag pretty hard. There was a study out recently that said optimistic women live longer. So that's good for me because I'm very optimistic. And I actually believe that we hold all the cards. And I'm sick and tired of Britain being pushed around when there is no need. There is a deficit, a trade deficit from the EU to us. Germany, the breadbasket of the EU, sells most of its cars in Britain. They desperately need to trade with us. So all I think we need is a bit of firmness, a bit of friendliness, a bit of politeness. We're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe, and we should be able to get a good deal and get a good deal quickly. And as for Theresa delaying and wasting time, I don't think that's what's happening at all. What she's doing is she's stacking her hand like a good negotiator. She went to India and she did some trade deals in advance. It's true that we can't sign them till we leave the EU, but we can line them up, and that is what she's doing. Right. I think she's playing it very well, very cleverly.
You're laughing at this.
She went to India and did a trade deal, but she had to agree for the free movement of workforce around the world. Exactly. That is a lot of Mickey Mouse crap. Sorry. But it really is, because nobody is going to give you something totally come in like that. They're going to want to trade, and they want to trade with their people, and they want to trade with the technology. It's not as straightforward as anyone makes out. If you go with the referendum in the north, I can take you to towns where the real reason was immigration. I will take you without a shadow of a doubt. And everybody believed that we were going to not have the free movement of people. We weren't going to have immigration. But if we don't have immigration in the south, who's going to wipe my backside when I go into a nursing home? Because I can tell you categorically, there is not one, if you like, English national working in most of our nursing homes. They're Filipinos,
I doubt that.
Asia.
I very much doubt that.
So you're Theresa May. What would you do?
If I was Theresa May, I'd go back to the country, because I tell you,
Yes. Yeah, well, that's the whole point, sorry, isn't it? You don't accept the results. You do not accept the result of the referendum. And if I may say so, there is a complete difference between open, free movement and having a fair, free immigration policy. Brexit, I was for Brexit. It's not anti-immigration. It's saying that somebody from Belgium shouldn't have special privileges over somebody from Bangladesh.
All right, well, let's pick up...
Trade, that's a good thing.
Hold on, let's pick up the point you made.
Free trade is a good thing.
Richard Bergen, do you think she should have an election to clear the air? You do. What do you think?
Explain all the facts to the world, to the country, and actually explain, because we don't know.
Yeah,
you know, I could have changed my mind. I could have really changed my mind if I thought it was right. But I voted Remain because I didn't really know what I was going into.
Okay. Richard Bergen?
All this talk of will Theresa May hold an election...
He wants one.
Yeah, all this talk of whether Theresa May will not hold an election before 2020. If she can't govern, if she's that weak, then she'll have to hold an election. So we'll see what happens. But I do want to pick up the point that the lady over there made about politics being done differently in grassroots politics. You made a really important point when you talked about the surprising to many election of Trump, when he talked about the surprising to the Conservative government Brexit vote and the surprising, to many political figures from the past and present, election of Jeremy Corbyn twice as Labour Party leader. What we've got now is a questioning of the old way of doing things. That's what happened in the United States. In essence, that's what happened with the Brexit vote. People don't want the status quo to continue, but the dangerous thing at this point is the fake anti-establishment politics. I don't believe that billionaire Donald Trump is anti-establishment. I don't believe he will deliver for the Rust Belt communities that voted for him in the United States. And I don't believe that UKIP, now with a lesser leader, will deliver on an anti-establishment basis either. The NHS, by the way, is Britain's proudest peacetime achievement. The new leader of UKIP, Paul Nuttall, wants to privatise it. There's nothing anti-establishment about that.
Don't go off on that. Is Jeremy Corbyn anti-establishment,
he
as you say?
Labour is the anti-establishment party.
Fine.
That's why the media don't like Jeremy Corbyn, because he's anti-establishment.
All right.
That's why the Westminster bubble doesn't like him, because he's anti-establishment.
OK, we've got a lot we want to talk about. Does anybody else want to make any points about the way that Brexit post the vote is being handled from the audience? Yes, you, and then we'll go on, because we've got a lot of other things that people want to talk about, and we've covered it regularly and at some length. Yes, madam.
I voted leave. OK, it doesn't matter what politician there was out there. I did not want to be part of the EU any longer. I don't like dictatorship. I think we should make our own decisions, and we should trade with whoever we like and allow them to trade with us if we accept them.
OK. Thank you. Right. Roy Horne, let's have your question. Roy Horne.
Is it time to raise basic rate income tax to improve the NHS and our public services?
Sarah Wallace.
Well, I certainly think we need to raise more money for our NHS and social care, particularly for social care, and I very much hope that next week, when we have the local government settlement, that we do see a fair settlement for social care, because the gentleman in the front row here is going to need some care, hopefully, at some point in the...
hopefully.
I said that.
He'll see you at the end.
No, but if the gentleman in the front row does need care, I hope it'll be available to him, and unfortunately, in many parts of the country now, we're seeing that social care is in a state of collapse.
How do you do it without increasing taxation?
Well, I think that there have been a number of
Everything's been
commissions
cut back,
that have been looked at this, and I think there are some very interesting proposals in something called the Barker Commission, and she looked, for example, at whether or not we could put an extra penny on national insurance, and I think as well
that
maybe
tax,
the time, but the time has come.
Hang on, that's being very, very political.
It's actually no. Can I explain in one way
well,
that I think it isn't, and that is that I think we also need to bring in some intergenerational fairness here, and I think one of the proposals was that wealthier people over 40 could contribute more, because we're the generation that didn't have to pay university fees, that rode the property boom, and I think that now what we're seeing is a shift away from younger people to older people.
So over 40s would pay more in national insurance?
That was one of them, but what I would say is in national insurance, what I would like to see, I would like to see that we actually have a national debate about how we do this. I would like to see our NHS and social care remain free at the point of use based on need and not ability to pay. But because, and happily, we are living so much longer, I mean, we've had a 31% increase in the number of people who are living to 85 and over now, but we need to plan for that. I think it's great news that people are living longer. I wish people would stop talking about it in gloomy terms, but we need to plan for it. It's a success. But it means that the scale of the increase in demand is enormous, and that means we've got to debate how we're going to raise that money. And I think it is time now to have a national debate about doing that in a fair basis, and I think an increase in national insurance and various other mechanisms that have been proposed by the Barker Commission, and we need to have a cross-party consensus.
But do you want us to get up to the level of spending that other European countries have? Because we're below France, we're below Germany. We have fewer hospital beds than France, fewer hospital beds than Germany, and yet we say that the NHS is the only religion left in Britain.
But we have to think of the NHS and social care together. So if you look at the way the OECD now measure this, actually we're only slightly below the European average, but we're well below what we should be spending on social care. And we've got to stop thinking of health and social care as separate.
Okay.
We need to look at them together.
The woman there. Yes.
I completely agree with your point about health and social care being together. That's definitely not what's happening at the moment. It's all very well looking to how we're going to invest in the future, so for when I'm needing care. But my grandma has just passed away and she didn't get the care that she paid her whole life for. So I want to know what investment we need to see immediately to help the most vulnerable people in our society at the moment.
Will Self, time to raise basic tax to pay.
Well, I don't know about basic tax, but, you know, the Gini coefficient, which is how you measure the disparity between the poor and the rich, has grown wider and wider in this society since the 1970s, while since the Thatcher regime of the 80s, our overall levels of income and taxation generally have been low. So, you know, progressive taxation is the sign of a civilised society. We should raise the top rate of tax, not the standard rate of tax. You don't have to be a mad Corbynista to understand that. Trouble is, it's very difficult to do things like this in the globalised world, which Nigel and his merry band are going to shove into the dustbin of history, or perhaps throw like a basketball player, because you can't, you know, you mess around with taxation rates, money sucks its way out of the city. You know, national governments have difficulty. You ask for a national debate on it, you'd be better off asking for an international debate on taxation, frankly.
Nigel Farage.
It doesn't work like that, Roy. You know, just because you pay tuppence extra on whether it's the low rate of tax or 10pence on the top rate of tax does not mean that money will go directly to the National Health Service or social care. The way it works is the money goes into the middle, it comes out, and at the minute, we still have a gap of between 70 and 80 billion pounds every year. That's remarkable. One of the most uncommented things in British politics over the last few years is that in the 5 years of the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, our national debt, that's the thing we've been building up ever since we fought Napoleon, our national debt doubled in those 5 years. So are there things we can do? Well, we could cut taxes, we could cut corporation taxes and get a lot more companies relocating here. It sounds today like McDonald's may well be relocating to this country. So things we can do.
Great jobs.
Well, do
great
you want
jobs
them,
for everybody.
Do you want them
Mine's a
paying
Big Mac.
Do you want them paying their corporate taxes in Switzerland, in Luxembourg, in Dublin, or in this country? And the answer is, let's get those big firms paying taxes.
That's been the whole
here.
policy we've followed for years, and that's why
we haven't
got seriously poor and voted for you, weirdly.
Will, we haven't done that. We haven't done that. We haven't done that. We ceded tax sovereignty, and we allowed big corporations to pay tax in Ireland or Luxembourg, and what we ought to be doing is being competitive. But honestly, the real answer to the question is that I don't think anyone knows how to deal with this. You know, Blair back in '97 thought, you know, think the unthinkable about pensions, about health provision. He ducked it, and the truth is we're living longer, we're all living healthier lifestyles, I'm told, and I don't think anyone really has got a clue how on earth we're going to give people pensions and healthcare 50 years from now.
Your party, you flirted with the idea of an insurance-based system originally, and then you went off it, didn't you?
Well, I looked at what the French were doing, and the French were definitely getting better bang for their buck with their health system. So I think, you know, there are lots of things about Europe that are wonderful and we can perhaps learn from. And maybe, if other health systems are better than ours in terms of delivery, we should learn from it.
We'll hear from Louise about the American one in a moment. I want to hear from the woman at the back there. I'll come to you, Richard. Yes, woman with spectacles at the very, very back. Yes.
I just wanted to take Nigel Farage up on his corporation tax point.
Yeah.
I run a business. I would happily pay more corporation tax. And I think the rich should be taxed more. It's completely bonkers that you want to make it easier for people to get rich instead of harder.
Well, I don't like these big companies doing business in this country but not paying their taxes in this country because they've been lured away to other parts of Europe.
But do you know what? We
and
don't
I want
want
them to pay
those
it
people
here.
in our country. If people are going to leave the country because they're not going to pay our taxes, let them go.
Well, we are living...
They're not civilised.
We are living in this, as Will said, we're living in this global world. We have to compete. Simple as that.
I want to go to the hand there with spectacles attached, I think. Yes.
Why does it have to be political? I would like to see the NHS and education system taken out and not be a political football all the time. The money wasted by every government doing different things and bringing in different aspects of it is horrendous. The money wasted. Why can't we have 2 panels of experts that run these 2 very important...
No, we can't have experts. They're not allowed anymore.
Richard Bergen.
I think it's really important that people have raised this issue. I'd like to congratulate the woman at the back who runs her own business for saying what a lot of people think, but a lot of people think that no one else agrees with, that some business people realise that it was wrong for the Conservative government to cut corporation tax. It's not good for our NHS. Corporation tax in the United States even is much higher. It's not good for our public services. And in the long run, it's not good for the economy in which our businesses operate. We've also got to look at the fact, not just at what the tax rates are at the top and elsewhere, but also the fact of, are we collecting the tax? There have been cuts to tax collection in terms of the staff in charge of dealing with tax avoidance and tax evasion, and with the super rich. I'm not even on about MPs, I'm on about the super rich. There is tax avoidance and tax evasion on an industrial scale, and we need determination to tackle that. It's the most unpatriotic thing, because when those people don't pay their tax, they are stealing from every person in this audience. They're stealing from your schools. They're stealing from your hospitals. Let's stop praising these people and electing them as a president of the United States, and let's start collecting their tax.
And you think that would fill the gap?
That would be part of the way to fill in the gap, but we also need a strategy for economic growth.
Well, the question...
We need a strategy for economic growth.
And Roy Horn says income tax. Dr. Horn, I think, yes? You think a basic rate of income tax should be increased?
I don't think it's just basic rate tax. That brings in a huge tax take. I think it's the higher rate taxes as well. And I accept all the points the panel have made regarding the evasion of tax. And the fact you actually need a new tax to deal with corporations, a sort of tax which they can only set against UK corporation tax. But I must say, the only person on your panel tonight who can change this is Sarah Willison. And she is crying a lot of crocodile tears over the NHS. The NHS needs money. Stop giving us this sort of rhetoric. Start finding more money.
What are her crocodile tears? You accuse her of hypocrisy by saying she's...
I do. She will sit there and tell us how difficult it is for the NHS to be run and how many people need to be treated. We know the demand of this equation. The Tories, Sarah Wollaston is in that group, are not providing the cash to meet that demand.
All right, Sarah,
it's as simple as that.
answer him and then I'll come to you, Louise.
I will answer your point, because it is something, because I chair the Health Committee, and this is something that we have looked at. We're there to hold the government to account, and I agree with you that we're not putting enough in, and that I think we have increased the amount of spending on the total health spend by 4.5. Well, I think, sir, I think where you misunderstand, sir, is that I'm not the government, that there is another part of Parliament which holds government to account, and that is the Select Committee system, and these are cross-party committees which are there to scrutinise what the government is doing and actually to hold them to account, to ask the questions that you're asking. And I think it's a good thing that there are more politicians now who come from backgrounds, from health, from all sorts of other backgrounds, who can use the experience that they have to come in and try and advise government and hold government to account. And that's the role I have. And I think that a lot of people assume that the select committees are part of government, but they're not. They're part of Parliament. But I understand people
there are
often
more
make
politicians talking about it,
yes.
But the Tory government is doing nothing about it.
Well, and what you need is
something.
a mechanism in Parliament to hold government to account, to make these points. And I know
the mechanism might be a Tory majority, mightn't it, in the House of Commons?
Yes, exactly.
I
The
know.
one
What we
people
do
who
have
can do
is a
something about this
majority.
are doing nothing.
Yes, well,
you say you want a mechanism. He says you're doing nothing, but you do have a majority, as you've just said. So
you could just change it tomorrow.
Well, indeed. And so my role in Parliament, as I say, is to hold the government to account and say, I think there is more that we could be doing to make our NHS and social care work better and to suggest mechanisms by which they could do that.
All right, then pause that.
Yeah.
Louise, okay, Doctor, Louise Mensch. No, hold on.
Sir,
All right, Louise.
I want to start
Louise
off.
Mensch.
I want to start off by apologising to Sarah Wollaston. During the Brexit referendum, I said that for narrow political gain, she had changed her vote, and I am sorry, Sarah, that I said that because I was completely wrong. You are one of the best MPs that we have seen in a long time, and this is a doctor who served the public all her life as a GP, working in rape crisis centres before she was elected in an open primary and came into politics. And when I hear this level of cynicism, I do get slightly annoyed, because when people are doing their best to stand up for the public and are just treated like random liars, that is wrong. Let me say, though, to the question that was asked in terms of should we raise tax on basic ratepayers? Should we raise it on corporations? Should we raise it on the super rich? Let's just have a big tax party and raise the tax on everybody. I don't think that there is this perfect balance between throwing money at the NHS in the state that it is in and receiving the best care. The question shouldn't be how can we spend more money on the NHS. The question should be how can we get the best possible care across disciplines for people that is free at the point of use. How can we get the best possible NHS? And the answer isn't just to raise taxes. That makes our economy worse. Socialism has never succeeded anywhere in the world that it has been tried. Capitalism is what makes these things grow. And we saw in DFID, the Department for International Development, they had some openness. They published where the money went. And journalists, people were able to look at it and see all the waste, all the consultants, all the corruption, all the stuff that's not going to the front line. I'd like to see some openness in what's spent in the NHS and see if we can improve our NHS for everybody in this country without just throwing money at it. And that's the answer.
Thank you. I'll come to one or two... Yes, woman up there. I'll come to you in a second, Richard.
I'm glad that you mentioned DFID, actually, because what I think would be important is not to look at increasing taxation, but looking at where our budgets are at the moment, and perhaps looking at reducing foreign aid for this reason, that a lot of the illegal immigrants in this country are using resources. And we discussed last week that you can't turn them away from hospitals and you can't turn them away from schools. So why can we not treat these people, give them all the resources that people who are legally here are entitled to, but get reimbursement from the foreign aid budget? So to shuffle the budgets that we have rather than increase taxation.
So use the DFID budget for people who have arrived here as immigrants?
When they're illegal immigrants here and we can't turn them away, they're effectively foreigners in this country. So treat them with the same budget that the foreign aid would have given them in their countries.
All right. What do you think of that? I'll come to you. What do you think of that particular proposal?
Well, I do want to make the point, by the way, that our NHS is kept running by migrants who work in our NHS, and we do need to look at increasing training, so we're training more doctors, so we're training more nurses. But on the point that Louise
on the point
raised...
she was making, can you just do that one? You heard her point.
I was talking about the budget, how you pay for it, how you get money, and it's not so much from increasing taxation, but looking at where our budget, our national budget is spent. We have a huge foreign aid budget, which is actually quite a lot more than other countries, and where we're looking after the interests of illegal immigrants who shouldn't really be here, but we don't want to turn them away from our hospitals and our schools and our housing, and indeed our prisons, and invoice that back to the foreign aid budget and get it back in.
The reason for the crisis in our NHS is not the amount of money that the Conservative government spends on foreign aid. And what I would say is that I do agree that the NHS should be properly funded, but it's not only proper funding that will solve the problem. I think we have, in Jeremy Hunt, a health secretary that is failing. Guess what? With the exception of Sarah, none of us have been a doctor. I think that Jeremy Hunt shouldn't be looking for politicians just to give the answers on the NHS. Perhaps he should listen to the professionals who work in the NHS rather than picking fights with them. But on the final point, Louise says that socialism has never worked. Socialism has worked. So the NHS is a pocket of socialism in our country, set up by a Labour government, which ensures that we don't have a situation like we do in the United States, where people feel for your wallet before they feel for your pulse. I'm very proud of that, and so should we all be.
I want to take... I'll take just one more point from the woman in green there, and then I must move on, I'm afraid.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that although we can put more money into the NHS, for sure, from tax, but actually, how are we going to ensure that that money is spent wisely? There's so much bureaucracy going on, and it's not necessarily going into the services that it needs to. So, for example, there's a report that came out last week which showed that suicide is the main cause of death of new mums.
Yeah.
That's something that in perinatal mental health, you know, we are not saving women who have just had babies.
Hold on. Just start again. Start again.
I had postnatal illness for 13 years.
All right.
No help.
No help. Okay, and I'll take one more point. You say in the checked shirt then, yes, and then...
I do work in the NHS.
Yes, what as?
I'm a manager.
Yeah?
Bureaucrat.
It's the only organisation I've worked in where everybody I've come across is genuinely focused on delivering the objective of that organisation. I've served in the army, and that was mostly the case in the army, but not universally. In the NHS it is. And with 98% of trust in deficit, or I forget the exact number, that's not simply a question of bad management. There is not enough money, and I spend all of my days trying to work out how we can deliver the care that we need to deliver with what diminishing amounts of money we have. We need more money.
And how... How do you think that more money should be got? By increasing taxation or by taking it from other
I
budgets?
don't know enough about tax mechanisms, but there are two people on the panel that are in a position to change it.
Well, once we've left the European Union...
You're not one of them.
We won't have.
I mean, a new hospital every week wouldn't be a bad start, would it? So let's get on with Article 50, and then we can build more hospitals.
But do you, Nigel Farage, were you a supporter of the 350
No, I certainly
million
wasn't. It was stupid. They should have put 200 million a week, which would have been factually absolutely correct and big enough to persuade people there were big savings to be made.
Why did the people wanting Brexit exaggerate?
They didn't need to.
Why did they?
Oh, don't ask me. The inside the mind of Tory politicians, I don't quite get it. But it was a big mistake. As I say, whether it was 350 or 200 was irrelevant, really. It was to say to people, we'll make big savings. But it was a mistake, yes.
OK. A lie, somebody shouts out. You in orange there, the woman in orange, just there on the corner.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is an important debate, but we've always focused on the NHS, and yet the real problem, as Sarah pointed out, is that it's actually funding social care, and that's funded by the local authorities. And until we actually accept that, we're always going to have pressure on our NHS because it's shifting what should be something that could be managed quite effectively and quite locally into a very, very expensive centres, putting real cost pressures on those centres. So we really do have to get the balance right and start.
And do you think we expect too much social care to be provided, not enough to be provided by families and individuals for their families?
I think that's an interesting point, because I think most people think the NHS was there to provide care, but increasingly care has been shifted out of the NHS into families, into social care, into care homes, and not being provided directly by the NHS. And I think that that is a balance that we need to look at and understand a bit better.
OK, and you say in pink here. Yes.
I work as a part-time carer, but I just wanted to pick up on what Louise said earlier when she apologised to Sarah, because I thought it was only Donald Trump that had the gall or had the ability to apologise.
Yeah. Oh, what Nigel Farage said at the beginning.
Thank you, Nigel.
I didn't say only Donald Trump. I said very few.
All right.
And she's not in elected politics. If she was a Tory MP, still she wouldn't have apologised.
All right, let's go. We've only a few minutes left tonight. Deborah Dibb, please. Deborah Dibb.
Thank you. Is Boris Johnson too much of a loose cannon to be Foreign Secretary?
So, we've seen him being reprimanded by Number 10 today for what he said. Will Self, is he too much of a loose cannon?
Yes, basically he is. Yeah, he is, yeah. I mean, I thought there was a feeling, Shay Self, that perhaps Mrs May had appointed him deliberately in order to humiliate him. But, of course, such is the closeness of our relationship with the House of Saud, who are our besties, that anything we can do to keep the House of Saud on side, we're prepared to do. I mean, After all, you mustn't be too hard on Boris. I mean, he did say the weird thing about the proxy wars, referring to this rather horrible thing where these people called Houthis are being killed in Yemen. But what he didn't say, which would have been much, much more worrying, was that, of course, the proxy wars are it's really a family argument between two sides of our dear friends, the House of Saud, who at any opportunity we like to give arms to. We actually have a British Army unit in Riyadh at the moment helping them plan to kill Houthis. So Boris was really being quite restrained, I think.
And can you have somebody as Foreign Secretary who says things that are immediately countermanded by Downing Street? Is that the new politics?
No, he's going to
healthy arrangement.
He's going to go, isn't he?
I don't know.
I think he's toast, isn't he?
Is he?
Yeah.
Doesn't she need him for the Brexit bit?
Well, I think she can probably come up with something better than that. But I mean, the whole show may be about to hit the end of the pier, David.
Louise Mensch.
No, I don't think he is. I mean, I say, is Boris too much of a loose cannon to be Foreign Secretary when Donald Trump has just been elected President of the United States? I mean, come on. I don't think that Boris was hard enough on the Saudis, and instead of just saying it's a family war between two sides, Shia and Sunni, I wish he'd said, why are we giving money to this hideous nation that is ISIS with an embassy that treats women as slaves and chops off their heads in car parks and calls them terrorists if they drive? We shouldn't have any kind of a relationship with Saudi Arabia, far less have the Foreign Office mandarins sucking up to them as their ally. And I like about Boris is he speaks his mind, and he is an intelligent man. He may joke, but he is clever. And he will stand up to Putin, as it's been a bit too much of a love fest tonight. I'll say to Nigel Farage, I think you're sucking up to this genocidal tyrant is absolutely disgusting. This is the man that killed 20-year-old Richard Mays and 10 other Britons, that shot down MH17. And the level of sucking up to this disgusting dictator is something that I hope Boris Johnson will put a stop to. And if he can stand up to the civil servants at the Foreign Office, he'll be doing us all a big favour.
Nigel Farage.
Well, I'm feeling as confused right now as Boris is most days. I find myself in total agreement with Will Self and Louise Mensch about Saudi Arabia. Just back in October, you know, Boris was saying what wonderful trade we had with Saudi Arabia, and the other point that wasn't made is that, you know, during all the terrible things that have been happening in the Middle East, the refugee crisis, the displaced peoples crisis, do you know how many people Saudi Arabia have taken? Not one. Not one. And yet, they're about to fund 200 new mosques in Germany. You may say that's fine, but when you realise it's the Saudis that have pushed Wahhabism, it's the Saudis that have pushed the burqa, it's the Saudis that have pushed the extreme form of Islam that is causing the problem. So I agree with you on that.
And you might just answer about Putin.
Oh, look, the point is this. I said already in this programme to the lady up there, I would not want to live in Putin's Russia. I completely understand that, you know, journalists like you who tweet a lot, I mean, you wouldn't last long over there, you know, I get all that. But what I am saying is, I do think our foreign policy of provoking him has been mistaken. I've no idea.
Provoking him.
But
He's
the problem
bombing
is,
hospitals in Aleppo. He's killing children right now, and you're sucking up to him.
No, obviously not doing that. But I am saying we made a major strategic error with the Ukraine. We helped to topple a democratically elected leader by trying to draw the Ukraine into our orbit, and I think we should stop provoking Putin, start talking to him. But I don't want him as a friend, but neither do I want to go to war with him. But the question, is Boris Johnson too much of a loose cannon to be? Well, as an individual, clearly he is. But what I'd like to know is, what does he stand for? What does he stand for? We haven't really heard, other than encouraging people to protest outside the embassy, the Russian embassy.
Brexit, maybe? Did he stand for Brexit?
I saw him getting off the Eurostar this week, and he looked a bit bewildered, I've got to tell you.
Did he stand for Brexit during the campaign, or are you saying he didn't really stand for Brexit?
He did stand for Brexit in the campaign, and now we hear he's briefing embassies that he supports free movement.
Hypocrisy.
We need some clarity.
We'll deal with some dictators, but not with others,
because
I don't like Saudi Arabia, but I like Putin.
I want to go to the... All right, Nigel, hold it, ma'am, if you would. I want to go to the man up there in the pink shirt. You, sir, yes.
Nigel's been after a job as an ambassador for some time. Perhaps he should be the ambassador to the House of Saud.
Wow, there you are. Thank you.
And you on the far, yes.
Earlier, Nigel Farage said that the Saudi Arabians were funding mosques in Germany and then straight away talked about Islamophobia. Isn't blasé comments like that the reason why people are feeling ostracised from society and moving towards extremist groups?
No. I have never, ever wanted, and there are some politicians in Europe that do, I do not want us to go to war with Islam, far from it. I want us to get on in this country. The damage that has been done by the Saudis pushing a very extreme form of Islam has done more harm than anything else.
You
I promise
expect, because then I come both sides here. Yeah, thank you. A quick point, if we would, because we're coming to the end. Yes.
You said, obviously, that you don't support, or you support Donald Trump, don't you? And he obviously doesn't like Islam for whatever reason.
OK, I can't go back to Mr Farage, because we've heard quite a lot from him.
Too much.
Richard Bergen, he said... You said it, I didn't say that. Richard Bergen.
On Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is, I'm afraid, an actor and a rank opportunist. One day he was for Remain, the next day he was for Leave, because he wanted to be leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. Then his position on Saudi Arabia. What can we believe? Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, in the House of Commons, Labour brought a motion calling on a halt on arms sales to Saudi Arabia, pending an investigation into whether or not those weapons are being used for war crimes in the Yemen. Boris Johnson stood at the dispatch box and said, nothing to see here, don't worry about it, and he voted against the motion. Then we find he's saying these other things when he's abroad. He's not a safe pair of hands, he's not responsible, and who knows what he actually believes in, apart from himself.
OK. He's your man, Sarah Wollaston, your Foreign Secretary.
He absolutely shouldn't lose his job. He spoke the truth. He called for leaders in the region to stand up and stop the sectarian bloodbath. And if that starts a debate that starts us in that direction, I'd say he's done us all a favour.
OK, thank you. Time's up.